Hey guys, tonight we wander into a Taino Island village at dawn, where every day begins with the gentle hum of life that you almost don't notice until you're in the middle of it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a quick comment telling me which country you're watching from and what the local time is there. It's always fun to feel like the whole world is nodding along with us, somewhere between sleep and the soft buzz of life. You blink into the pale pink light brushing over the bohos, their conical roofs made of palm leaves and cane swaying slightly in the breeze. The air smells faintly of damp earth and smoked fish from last night's catch, a scent you find strangely grounding. A hammock rocks gently in the corner of one home, and you see a child stirring, rubbing sleep from her eyes. You probably won't survive this style, but watching a village awaken is far more peaceful than any disaster scenario. Your feet sink slightly into the soft sand as you step toward the communal plaza, where neighbors begin to greet each other, their voices warm, carrying laughter and the occasional clink of tools. Dogs stretch lazily in the sun, and chickens cluck among the undergrowth, hopping between shaded patches. Historians still argue whether Taino villagers sang more in the morning or during evening ceremonies, but either way, sound floats over the village like invisible threads binding everyone together. Some older women carry baskets of yuca, the raw cassava root, carefully balanced on their heads, moving with practiced ease, while men return from the shoreline, dragging nets and small canoes ashore. You notice the subtle hierarchy already forming, children helping elders with small chores, young adults running errands, a soft choreography that feels both efficient and instinctive. You follow a narrow path lined with herbs and flowering plants, the petals glinting with dew. Birds, bright and bold, call to each other from the treetops, as if narrating the slow unveiling of the day. As you step closer to the largest boho, you see hammocks strung along the outer walls, some empty, some occupied by villagers beginning to stir. Smoke curls lazily from cooking fires, promising bitterly sweet cassava porridge. The air is warm, but still carries the crispness of night retreating. You hear the soft scraping of baskets against the wooden posts, the gentle splash of water in small containers, and even the faint rhythm of drums practicing for later celebrations. The village is alive, yet not rushed, every movement measured, intentional. You notice a small child chasing a hen, laughing, narrowly missing a startled dog, and you smile. Everyone is already immersed in their routine, the sun has barely risen, but the Taino are quietly orchestrating the rhythms that will carry them through the day. And somehow, watching this, you feel suspended between observation and participation, like a guest in a world where every small gesture matters. You inhale, taking in the scents, sounds, and soft light, and realize you're part of this morning now, whether you carry a basket, swing a hammer, or simply watch from the shadows. Even the oldest, moss-dappled boho seems to hum with life, the timber expanding gently in the warmth. You hear a faint splash from the nearby stream, someone washing dishes, or maybe their face, or both, and it feels like the day's heartbeat, steady and rhythmic. Soon the sun will climb higher, illuminating the full spread of gardens, paths, and people. You note the communal nature of everything. Food, work, even laughter and gossip are shared freely. There's an almost imperceptible lesson in watching the dawn the Taino know that life is a series of small, interconnected motions, each quietly preparing for what comes next. And as you stand there, sand underfoot and light spilling over rooftops, you feel both invited and gently reminded that this is just the beginning of a day you can barely imagine fully. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun has risen a little higher now, and you move deeper into the rhythm of the village, where morning tasks are already humming along like an invisible engine. Women carry baskets of yuca or sweet potatoes, exchanging quiet greetings as they move from boho to boho, while men check nets or sharpen tools, each motion practiced, almost automatic. You join in, feeling a little clumsy as your hands fumble with a small bundle of herbs or a canoe paddle, but the villagers simply smile and redirect you without a word, letting you ease into their daily flow. The plaza is alive with small, overlapping routines. Children run errands, carrying clay pots or fetching water, their laughter weaving through the more measured chatter of adults. Someone is grinding maize on a stone, the rhythm of the pestle like a heartbeat beneath the morning air. You scoop up a handful of the coarse meal, feeling it gritty between your fingers, and realize how much work goes into even the simplest breakfast. Historians still argue whether Taino villagers prepared maize porridge for ceremonial purposes or purely for sustenance, but here both seem to exist seamlessly side by side. You watch as neighbors share their goods freely, dropping a bundle of bananas into a friend's basket, or offering a fish without expectation. Trade and generosity are intertwined. The same hands that harvest are the hands that distribute. You notice that even in these simple exchanges, a subtle social etiquette governs interactions: who greets first, how you hand over food, when to smile or laugh. There's a fluidity, a kind of unspoken choreography that feels almost effortless once you get used to it. Over by the shoreline, men untangle nets, laughing as they remember yesterday's minor mishaps. Nets caught on coral, a turtle narrowly escaping capture. You join a canoe crew, helping to push it into the gentle waves. The rhythm of the paddles is meditative, almost hypnotic, and you feel the salty spray on your skin. A small boy paddles nearby with impressive skill, and you suspect he's learning far earlier than children on your own timeline would. You probably won't survive this style, but you can try. Meanwhile, in the gardens, women tend to cassava and sweet potato canucos, carefully shaping the soil around each plant. You kneel beside them, patting earth over roots, learning to handle cassava, which must be processed just so to remove its natural toxins. The air is fragrant with herbs, and someone hums a tune that feels older than memory itself. Quirky fact: some Taino families were said to sprinkle a tiny pinch of ground coral in the soil as a kind of ritual blessing. Scholars still debate whether this was symbolic, practical, or a little of both. As you move from task to task, you realize the morning isn't just about labor, it's about rhythm, connection, and the subtle weaving of community. You watch the cacique greet early arrivals, his presence commanding but not oppressive, and notice the ease with which work flows alongside social bonds. Laughter, shared advice, and gentle teasing pepper the air, grounding the village in a sense of shared purpose. By the time the sun has climbed halfway across the sky, you've delivered water, arranged baskets, helped untangle nets, and tended a small patch of canico. You feel the collective pulse of the village, everyone working, helping, laughing, and preparing together. The early morning, so quiet and intimate, has already set the tone for a full day, and you can't help but feel grateful to witness it. It's a delicate balance, every person matters, every movement counts, and the smallest act can ripple through the community in ways you can't yet fully see. And as you pause to rest for a moment, leaning on the rim of a basket and feeling the warmth of the sun on your back, you notice the details that might have gone unnoticed before. A line of ants marching along a board, a bird settling in a flowering tree, a child balancing a cup of water with. Exaggerated care. Everything is alive, and everything matters. This is the heartbeat of the Taino morning. A quiet rhythm that threads together work, social life, and the gentle pulse of existence itself. By mid-morning, you find yourself wandering into the heart of the Taino agricultural world, the conucos, those carefully tended raised garden plots that feed the entire village. The soil is warm beneath your fingers, slightly damp from last night's dew, and you notice the neat ridges separating cassava, sweet potatoes, maize, and a scattering of herbs. Each plant is spaced with intention, as if the earth itself were participating in a quiet conversation with the villagers. You kneel to inspect a young cassava shoot, marveling at how much care goes into each one, planting, hilling, watering, and sometimes even chanting soft words, the meaning of which scholars still debate. You begin helping, though your efforts feel clumsy compared to the practiced hands around you. The Taino women move rhythmically, patting soil around roots, guiding sprouts upright, and explaining, through gestures and soft words, how to check for pests or dry spots. Cassava, or yuca, is particularly delicate. The raw root contains cyanide compounds that must be carefully removed during processing. You scrape a bit of dirt, roll a small tuber in your palm, and notice the earthy scent mixing with the faint aroma of wildflowers nearby. A quirky tip you overhear: some families supposedly sprinkled powdered coral around the roots to encourage the spirits of the soil, though historians still argue whether this was a genuine practice or a later embellishment by observers. As you work, you notice how much the garden reflects the community's social structure. Tasks are divided but fluid. Children pull weeds or water small patches, elders supervise and offer guidance, and young adults rotate between planting and helping with other chores. The hum of conversation drifts over the garden. Advice, jokes, and soft warnings mingle with laughter. You probably won't survive this style if you try to ignore the delicate timing here. Every plant, every root has its moment, and misstep can cost days of effort. You pause to admire a row of sweet potato vines curling over the ridges, their deep green leaves glistening with droplets of moisture. Nearby, maize stalks rise sturdily, their tassels catching the sunlight, a reminder of both sustenance and ceremony. Maize is not just food here, it's central to Taino identity, woven into myths, rituals, and daily meals alike. You help carefully remove a few weeds, noticing that the soil crumbles easily between your fingers, evidence of long-term cultivation and the villagers' meticulous care for their plots. A group of children run past, carrying small baskets of harvested yucca or herbs, laughing as a chicken darts between their legs. One pauses to show you a small tuber, proud of its size and shape, and you grin, feeling the infectious pride that comes from tending something with patience. The rhythm of work feels almost meditative, the hum of insects, the soft rustle of leaves, the occasional call of a bird overhead forming a backdrop for this living classroom. You notice the subtle markers of experience in the hands around you, calloused palms, stained fingernails, precise motions that have been repeated countless times. Every plant tells a story of growth, care, and communal knowledge passed down over generations. You're allowed to help, but the garden insists you pay attention, listen, and learn. Even a small misstep, like compacting soil too heavily or pulling a young shoot too quickly, draws gentle corrections. By late morning, your arms ache slightly, your palms are dusty, and the sun warms your back. But you also feel connected to something deeper, a cycle of life that's orchestrated as much by human hands as by sun, rain, and the patience of the earth itself. You hear an elder hum a tune while turning the soil, a melody intertwined with history, teaching, and maybe just a little magic. The Conuco is more than sustenance, it's a living classroom, a social hub, and a quiet testament to the Taino's intimate understanding of their environment. As you step back to look at the neat, flourishing rows, you feel a sense of accomplishment and humility. Every ridge, every plant, every tiny leaf is a result of careful attention, inherited knowledge, and shared labor. And for a moment, as the breeze carries the mixed scents of earth, herbs, and sunlight, you realize that the rhythm of these gardens mirrors the rhythm of the village itself, interconnected, deliberate, and quietly beautiful. The midday sun is climbing higher now, and you make your way toward the shoreline, where the salt tang of the sea mingles with the earthy perfume of the gardens. Men and older boys are already preparing canoes, untangling nets, and checking lines, while younger children watch from the sand, mimicking every movement with serious determination. You grab a small paddle, your fingers sticky from soil, and step carefully into a dugout canoe, feeling the slight give beneath your weight. You probably won't survive this style if you underestimate the currents, but the villagers' calm confidence is reassuring, and somehow you trust the water will carry you safely. As the canoe glides into the gentle waves, the rhythmic splash of your paddle blends with the soft murmur of the village fading behind you. The wind brushes your hair, carrying a hint of salt, and you notice the glint of sunlight on the water's surface, making it look almost liquid gold. You scan the horizon and see the familiar outlines of other canoes, villagers heading to reefs, shallow bays, and fishing grounds known only to them. Historians still argue whether Taino fishing techniques were purely for sustenance or also designed for early trade, but here you see both purposes intertwined seamlessly. Nets are thrown, lines set, and traps checked, each action precise and practiced. A small boy next to you lifts a net carefully, revealing a silver fish that glints in the sun. He grins, pride shining across his face. You help untangle the line, feeling the tension in your fingers, and realize that every catch, no matter how small, is crucial for the communal meal. Occasionally, a crab scuttles along the canoe's edge, and someone laughs as it teeters before hopping back into the water. Quirky fact, some Taino fishermen reportedly used a mixture of crushed coral and plant sap to lure fish. Scholars still debate whether this was widespread practice or isolated experimentation. The rhythm of paddling, setting nets, and hauling in fish becomes almost hypnotic. You notice the subtle expertise, the way someone reads the tide, anticipates a current, or spots a school of fish beneath the waves. Your muscles begin to synchronize with the motion, the splash of water against the canoe, the calls of seabirds overhead. Even as you struggle with the rhythm at first, the villagers' quiet encouragement allows you to fall into a kind of moving meditation. After a while, you glide closer to the reef, watching small fish dart among corals, their colors startling against the muted tones of sand and rock. Someone points out a larger fish hiding in a shadow, and you marvel at their keen eyesight and patience. Fishing here is more than work. It's a blend of instinct, observation, and learned skill. You notice a faint trail of smoke rising from a distant beach bonfire, probably someone cooking an early catch, and you inhale the mix of salt, sun, and roasting fish. You return to the shore, the canoe gliding over small waves, nets full, and everyone contributing to the communal harvest. Children gather near the water's edge, helping untangle lines and laughing as fish slip back into the surf. The scene is a dance, motion, sound, and life flowing together. Even the smallest gestures, a gentle splash, a careful hand on a net, a nod to a neighbor, carry meaning. By the time you step onto the sand again, your arms tired and your skin warm from the sun and spray, you feel a quiet satisfaction. Fishing in the Taino way is about more than filling bellies. It's about rhythm, observation, and connection. The sea is a teacher, the nets are lessons, and every fish, crab or shell tells a story of patience and understanding. And as you watch the villagers sort their catch for today's meals, you feel a subtle thrill of inclusion, as though you, too, are now part of this intricate, sun-drenched ritual. By early afternoon, the heat settles into a steady, drowsy warmth, and you drift from the shoreline back toward the shaded edges of the village, where hands are busy crafting the objects that quietly hold daily life together. Under wide palm roofs, you see groups gathered around low workspaces, the air filled with soft scraping sounds, the tap of stone on stone, and the occasional satisfied hum. This is where utility turns into something almost beautiful without trying too hard. You sit nearby, grateful for the shade, and watch as a woman shapes wet clay between her palms, her fingers leaving gentle ridges that will later help someone grip the vessel more easily. Clay pots dry in uneven rows, their surfaces decorated with subtle patterns pressed in using shells or carved sticks. None of this feels rushed. Each pot seems to know it will be used, cracked, repaired, and used again. You probably won't survive this style if you expect perfection on the first try, because here, mastery comes from repetition and patience, not from flawless results. Historians still argue whether certain decorative patterns marked family groups or were simply aesthetic preferences, but watching the careful hands at work, you sense meaning layered quietly into every curve. Nearby, a man works on a stone tool, rhythmically striking a core to flake off sharp edges. The sound is crisp and deliberate, and you flinch slightly each time a fragment snaps free. He glances at you, amused, and slows his pace so you can see the angle of the strike. Stone blades, scrapers, and axes are laid out neatly beside him, each shaped for a specific task. A quirky tidbit floats through the conversation. Some Taino toolmakers were said to test sharpness by slicing thin palm fibers mid-air, though scholars still debate whether this was common practice or a bit of impressed storytelling passed down later. You move along to another shaded corner where weaving is underway. Long strands of palm fiber are twisted, crossed, and tightened into baskets sturdy enough to carry cassava, fish, or even small children. The motion is hypnotic, and soon you find yourself leaning in, trying to follow the pattern. Someone places a half-finished basket in your hands, guiding your fingers gently, correcting your grip with a soft laugh. Your first few attempts are uneven, but no one seems bothered. This is how learning works here, by doing, messing up, and trying again. Feathers, shells, and beads lie scattered nearby, waiting to become ornaments, belts, or ceremonial pieces. You pick up a small shell pendant, its surface worn smooth, and wonder how many hands have touched it before. Ornamentation here isn't about excess, it's about identity, memory, and subtle expression. You notice how certain colors and materials are favored by different people, perhaps signaling age, role, or personal taste. Historians still argue whether these adornments held strict symbolic meanings or were more fluid and personal, shifting with mood and occasion. As you watch, you realize how deeply interconnected these crafts are with the rest of village life. The pot will hold food from the gardens and sea, the basket will carry the day's catch, the blade will cut fibers, prepare meals, and shape other tools. Nothing exists in isolation. Even broken items are repurposed. Cracked pots become scoops. Dull blades become scrapers. There's a quiet efficiency here that feels both practical and strangely comforting. The heat of the day hums in the background, insects buzzing lazily as the village settles into this productive lull. Children wander in and out of the shaded spaces, watching, asking questions, sometimes handing tools back to their owners with exaggerated seriousness. An elder corrects a child's weaving pattern with a gentle tap and a smile, and you sense how knowledge flows naturally across generations, without formal lessons or rigid instruction. You sit back for a moment, letting the sounds wash over you, scraping, tapping, weaving, murmured conversation. There's no urgency, no ticking clock. Crafting here is not a separate activity, it's woven into daily life as seamlessly as eating or resting. You feel your shoulders relax, your breathing slow, as if the steady rhythm of hands at work is gently coaxing you toward calm. By the time the sun begins to dip slightly, casting longer shadows across the village floor, several finished items are set aside, ready to be used or traded. You touch the edge of a newly fired pot, still warm, and feel a small spark of pride, even though you only watched and helped a little. These objects may seem simple, but they carry stories, effort, and the quiet satisfaction of making something with purpose. And as you rise to move on, you carry with you the sense that here, in these shaded corners, the village's resilience is shaped one careful motion at a time. The afternoon heat softens into something more forgiving as you're drawn toward the cooking spaces, where the village's energy gathers again around food. Fires are coaxed back to life, embers nudged and fed until thin blue smoke curls upward, carrying the promise of a meal. You sit near a low hearth and watch cassava roots being washed, peeled and grated with calm precision. The rasping sound of root against stone is steady and soothing, like rain tapping leaves. You learn quickly that this isn't casual cooking. Cassava demands respect. Raw yucca contains toxins, and the careful grating, squeezing and drying are essential steps. Skip one, and you're having a very bad afternoon. You probably won't survive this style if you rush it. A long woven press, simple, brilliant, hangs from a beam as grated cassava pulp is packed inside and stretched to squeeze out liquid. The motion is patient and practiced, and you feel the quiet seriousness around it. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Taino mastered cassava processing long before outsiders arrived, turning a dangerous root into the daily bread of island life. Nearby, thin cassava cakes bake on flat griddles, their edges curling slightly as they firm up. The smell is nutty, faintly sour, and surprisingly comforting. Fish from the morning's catch are cleaned and split, then laid over racks to smoke or set gently on the fire. Someone sprinkles herbs you recognize from the gardens, and someone else adds a pinch of salt gathered from dried seawater. A pot bubbles softly, holding a stew of fish, peppers, and root vegetables, and the steam drifts toward you like an invitation. Children hover at the edges, hoping to sneak a taste, only to be shooed away with mock sternness. One succeeds anyway, grinning with cheeks full, and everyone pretends not to notice. You notice how food preparation is communal without being chaotic. Tasks flow naturally. One person grates, another squeezes, another tends the fire, another flips cassava bread with a practiced flick of the wrist. Stories begin to surface as hands work, small retellings of the morning's fishing mishaps, a joke about a net that tried to escape, a teasing remark about someone's uneven cassava cake. Light joke number 1 lands gently when someone claims their bread is lumpy because the spirits like texture, and you snort quietly, earning a smile. As the meal comes together, people gather closer, sitting on low stools or directly on the packed earth. Food is passed hand to hand, portions adjusted instinctively so everyone gets enough. There's no sense of hoarding or hierarchy here. Elders are served with respect, children are fed generously, and guests, yes, that's you, are encouraged to eat more than you think you should. Historians still argue whether Taino feasts followed strict ceremonial rules or shifted fluidly with circumstance, but watching now, it feels adaptable, shaped by need, mood, and season. You take your first bite of cassava bread, warm and slightly crisp, and follow it with fish so tender it flakes at the touch. It's simple food, but deeply satisfying. Someone passes you a gourd cup of a mildly fermented drink made from cassava or maize, tangy and refreshing. A quirky tidbit floats through the group. Some early accounts suggest these drinks were sometimes flavored with honey or fruit during special gatherings, though scholars still debate how common that really was versus the plain, everyday version you're tasting now. Either way, it's surprisingly good, and you sip slowly, feeling the day's work settle into your muscles. As people eat, the pace slows. Conversation drops to a murmur, punctuated by laughter and the crackle of fire. The heat of the day finally loosens its grip, and a breeze slips through the village, stirring smoke and palm leaves. You notice how the meal does more than feed bodies. It resets the village. Tired shoulders relax, faces soften, and the earlier intensity of work dissolves into shared ease. Light joke number 2 appears when someone dramatically fans themselves and declares the fire hotter than the sun, earning exaggerated nods all around. After the main meal, leftovers are carefully set aside, wrapped or stored for later. Nothing is wasted. Bones will be used for tools or stock, scraps fed to animals, ashes saved for practical uses. Children help carry dishes to be rinsed at the stream, splashing water and laughing until an elder reminds them, gently, that bowls are not boats. You probably won't survive this style if you treat cleanup as optional, but here, it's just another shared rhythm. As dusk begins to lean in, a few people bring out extra food, signaling that tonight's meal edges toward something more social. Not a grand ceremony, just a fuller gathering. Someone starts a low chant, more like a hum, and others join in without thinking. The sound blends with the fading light, the warm glow of fires, the soft chewing and murmured talk. Historians still argue whether these everyday meals sometimes blurred into ritual ritos or remained strictly informal, but from where you sit, the line seems intentionally soft. You lean back, belly warm, hands smelling faintly of smoke and cassava, and watch the flames dance. The day has carried you from dawn to gardens to sea to craft, and now to this shared nourishment. Food here isn't a break from life, it's the hinge that connects everything else. As the last light slips away and the village settles into evening, you feel that familiar sleepy pull, the kind that comes from good work, good company, and a full stomach. As the heat finally releases its hold and the air cools into something breathable, your attention shifts to the quieter structures that keep the village moving smoothly: leadership, order, and the unspoken rules everyone seems to know by heart. You notice the cacique seated beneath a broad shade tree, not elevated, not surrounded by guards, just present. People pass by, offering brief words, small requests, or updates, and the exchanges are calm, almost casual. Authority here doesn't shout, it listens. You probably won't survive this style if you expect a throne and dramatic speeches, because Taino leadership is woven subtly into daily life. You watch as a small dispute unfolds near the plaza, 2 young men arguing over a fishing net that seems to belong to both of them. The cacique listens, nods, asks a few quiet questions, and then gestures for an elder to weigh in. The resolution is quick, practical, and oddly satisfying. No one storms off. The net is shared, and tomorrow's catch will be divided. This reflects a mainstream historical understanding. Taino caciques ruled through persuasion, kinship, and ritual authority rather than brute force. Power was relational, not absolute. Around the cacique, a loose council forms, elders, respected craft workers, and experienced fishers, each offering advice when needed. You realize leadership here is distributed, not centralized. Children drift close, absorbing these interactions without formal instruction, learning how decisions are made simply by watching. Someone cracks a light joke about how even the spirits must sit in council sometimes, and the group chuckles, tension dissolving easily. That's joke number 1, and it lands softly, like everything else here. You notice markers of social hierarchy, but they're subtle. Certain ornaments, the placement of hammocks, the way people address one another, all signal status without creating distance. Women speak freely in discussions about food, land, and family matters, and you sense their influence is woven deeply into the village's functioning. Historians still argue about the exact balance of power between men and women in Taino society, especially across different islands, but standing here, it's clear that authority flows through many hands. As evening approaches, preparations begin for a small gathering, nothing ceremonial yet, just an opportunity for people to check in, share news, and reinforce bonds. The cacique moves among groups, listening more than speaking, occasionally offering guidance or settling a minor concern. You're struck by how approachable leadership feels. There's no sense of fear, only respect, built through consistency and presence rather than spectacle. A visiting canoe arrives from a nearby settlement, and the cacique is among the first to greet them. There's an easy exchange of goods, greetings, and updates: who's fishing well, which gardens are thriving, who's expecting a child. You notice how leadership extends beyond the village, maintaining relationships across islands and shores. A quirky tidbit surfaces in conversation. Some accounts suggest caciques kept mental maps of alliances and obligations more complex than any written ledger, though scholars still debate how formal these networks truly were. As you sit nearby, listening, you feel the weight of how much trust this system requires. Disputes are settled by dialogue, resources shared through expectation rather than enforcement, and social order maintained by mutual dependence. You probably won't survive this style if you try to game the system, because reputation matters here. Your actions echo longer than your words. Light joke number 2 floats by when someone quips that even the most stubborn canoe eventually follows the current, drawing nods and a few amused snorts. Children weave through the gathering, half listening, half playing, already absorbing lessons about respect, patience, and responsibility. Elders tell short anecdotes, not long stories yet, just reminders of past decisions, good and bad. These are cautionary tales in miniature, shaping behavior without lectures. You realize that governance here is inseparable from daily life. It's not an event, it's a presence. As darkness thickens and the first stars appear, the informal council begins to dissolve. People drift back to their families, disputes settled, plans made, nothing dramatic, nothing unresolved. The cacique remains a while longer, watching the village like a quiet anchor, then rises and blends back into the flow of evening life. You feel a gentle respect settle in your chest. Leadership here isn't about standing above others, it's about standing among them, steady and attentive. And as you move on, you carry the sense that the village's calm isn't accidental, it's carefully maintained, day after day, through listening, shared responsibility, and the soft power of community trust. Night leans closer now, and with it comes a shift you can almost feel in your bones, a soft turning from practical matters toward the unseen. You're drawn toward a quieter space near one of the larger bohos, where small carved figures rest on low platforms, half lit by firelight. These are zemis, sacred objects embodying spirits, ancestors, or forces of nature, and even without fully understanding them, you sense their weight in the village's inner life. Conversation lowers here, voices smoothing out as if the air itself asks for gentler sounds. You probably won't survive this style if you treat belief like a decoration, because here, it's part of the architecture of daily thought. Someone motions for you to sit, and you do, feeling the packed earth cool beneath you. A gourd rattle shakes softly, not in performance, but almost as punctuation to the moment. The zemis vary in shape, some humanoid, some abstract, some carved from stone, others from wood or bone. Mainstream history tells us that Taino's spiritual life centered on these zemis, which were believed to house protective or guiding forces connected to family lines, fertility, weather, and survival. You notice how people acknowledge them casually, with nods or brief touches, the way you might acknowledge something important without making a show of it. A behik, the village's spiritual specialist, joins the small gathering. There's no dramatic entrance, just a presence, calm and observant. He speaks quietly, telling a short account of a zemi associated with rainfall, reminding everyone of a past season when the rains came late and lessons were learned the hard way. The story isn't frightening, just grounding, tying memory, warning, and reassurance together. Historians still argue whether Behiks held centralized religious power or acted more as healers and advisors, shifting roles depending on circumstance, and watching now, you can believe both interpretations at once. The fire crackles, sending sparks upward, and shadows stretch across the carvings, making them seem almost alive. Someone offers a pinch of cohoba, a hallucinogenic snuff used in certain rituals, but tonight it's symbolic rather than consumed. A quirky historical tidbit drifts through the murmurs. Some early accounts claim caciques inhaled cohoba to communicate directly with zemis, though scholars still debate how often this occurred versus how much was exaggerated by outside observers. Either way, the respect for altered states and vision is palpable, even in this quiet moment. You listen as a woman hums a low chant, barely louder than the insects. Others join, not in unison, but layered softly, creating a sound that feels more like breathing than music. The chant isn't for spectacle, it's for alignment, for reminding everyone that the visible world is only part of the story. You feel your shoulders drop, your thoughts slowing, as if the rhythm is gently untying knots you didn't realize you were carrying. Children sit close to their parents, wide-eyed but calm, absorbing the atmosphere. No one explains everything to them, and yet everything is being taught. This is how belief survives here, not through doctrine, but through presence, repetition, and shared moments. Light joke number 1 slips in when a child whispers that a particular zemi looks like it's making a funny face, and an elder suppresses a laugh, gently reminding them that even spirits can have personality. The mood softens, not broken, just warmed. As the gathering continues, people speak briefly to the zemis, requests for good fishing, healthy children, gentle weather. Nothing dramatic, nothing desperate. You notice how belief here is practical, woven into the same fabric as gardening and canoe making. Spirits are not distant. They're neighbors, advisors, reminders of balance. Historians still argue whether Taino spirituality was more animistic or ancestral in focus, but sitting here, you sense it's both, and neither label quite fits. Eventually, the fire is allowed to burn lower. The chants fade into silence, replaced by the chorus of night insects and the distant sigh of waves. People rise quietly, touching a zemi or the earth before leaving, small gestures that feel deeply personal. You linger a moment longer, watching the last glow of embers reflect in polished stone eyes. As you stand and move back toward the sleeping areas, the night feels thicker, more alive. Belief hasn't ended with the gathering. It's simply folded back into the routine, carried into dreams, into tomorrow's weather, into the way people will greet the morning. You feel calm, grounded, and a little awed, not by mystery alone, but by how seamlessly the Taino allow the sacred and the ordinary to share the same space. The village loosens its shoulders as full night settles in, and what follows feels like a collective exhale. Work is done, fires are low, and now there's space for play, stories, and the gentle release that keeps life from becoming only labor. You find yourself drawn back toward the plaza, where torchlight flickers and people gather not out of obligation, but habit and comfort. Someone taps a drum experimentally, testing the skin, and a few heads turn with quiet anticipation. You probably won't survive this style if you expect silence after dark, because this is when the village starts to breathe differently. Children take over first, of course. They chase one another in looping patterns, playing a ball game that echoes the famous Beatty, though this version is looser, less formal. A rubbery ball arcs through the torchlight, thudding against hips and shoulders, and the kids argue cheerfully over points that seem to exist only in their own logic. This ties to a mainstream historical fact. Ball games held social and ritual importance among the Taino, blending sport, ceremony, and storytelling. Here, though, it's mostly laughter and movement, the rules bending as easily as the children themselves. As the game winds down, adults begin to share stories. No one stands on a stage. Stories emerge in pockets, forming and dissolving as people drift closer or away. An elder begins recounting a tale of Yucayeques, the storm spirit, her anger twisting winds and waves. The story is familiar to most, but it's told anyway, the way a favourite song is always worth hearing again. Historians still argue how fixed these oral stories were, whether they followed strict structures or changed with each telling, and listening now, you suspect flexibility was part of the point. Someone else counters with a humorous anecdote about a fisherman who mistook a floating log for a sleeping manatee and apologized to it for several minutes. That's light joke number 1, and it lands beautifully, laughter rippling through the group. You feel your own laughter loosen, the day's weight lifting just a little. Storytelling here isn't just entertainment, it's glue, binding generations through shared memory and shared amusement. Soon, music weaves in. Drums find a steady pulse, rattles add texture, and feet begin to move almost without instruction. This is an orato, not a grand ceremonial one, but a relaxed, living version. People sing, chant, and step in repeating patterns, some joining briefly, others watching and clapping along. You let yourself move too, awkward at first, then easier as you realize precision isn't the goal. Participation is. A quirky tidbit surfaces as someone mentions that certain orato steps were believed to encode historical events, though scholars still debate how literal that encoding really was versus symbolic remembrance. The firelight dances across faces, highlighting smiles, deepening shadows, and giving everyone a soft, dreamlike glow. Children nod off against parents' shoulders, lulled by rhythm and warmth. Elders clap slowly, conserving energy but keeping time. You notice how stories continue even within the dance, verses referencing ancestors, jokes slipped into chants, gentle reminders of shared history. You probably won't survive this style if you try to separate fun from meaning here, because they're tangled together. Play teaches cooperation. Stories teach memory. Dance teaches belonging. Even the jokes carry lessons, lightly wrapped so they don't feel heavy. Light joke number 2 sneaks in when someone deliberately misses a step and bows theatrically, blaming the sand for tripping them. The crowd rewards the performance with approving laughter. As the night deepens, the pace slows. Songs stretch out, drums soften, and the energy settles into something calmer. The stars overhead feel closer now, as if they're leaning in to listen. A final story is shared, short, almost whispered, about a spirit who guides travellers home by starlight. You feel the quiet settle after it, the way silence does after a good ending. Gradually, people drift away, gathering sleeping children, stamping out torches, and offering soft goodnights. The plaza empties, leaving only glowing embers and the faint echo of rhythm in the air. You linger a moment longer, feeling that warm, sleepy satisfaction that comes from connection and shared joy. Tonight's stories, dances, and laughter will ripple forward, carried into dreams and retold in future nights, shaping the village as surely as gardens and nets. As the plaza empties and the last echoes of laughter fade, attention turns to the quieter work of care, tending bodies, soothing aches, and keeping the village steady through small acts of healing. You follow a dim lantern glow toward a boho, where the bahike kneels beside a low mat, arranging bundles of leaves, roots, and gourds. The air here smells different, bitter, green, and faintly sweet, like crushed herbs and warm skin. You probably won't survive this style if you dismiss these remedies as superstition, because for the Taino, care is a daily practice grounded in observation and memory. A woman sits with her ankle wrapped in leaves, having twisted it earlier while carrying water. The bahik presses gently, murmuring reassurance, then binds the wrap tighter with practiced hands. Mainstream history tells us that Taino healers relied heavily on botanical knowledge, plants for pain, fever, digestion and wounds, knowledge refined through generations of trial and careful listening to the body. You watch as a poultice is mixed, the leaves crushed with a stone until they release a sharp, medicinal scent. The woman exhales as it's applied, relief visible in her shoulders. Children drift in and out, curious but calm. One coughs softly, and a gourd cup of warm herbal infusion appears in their hands without fuss. The child grimaces, then drinks anyway, rewarded with a smile and a gentle joke about how the bitter ones work fastest. That's light joke number 1, and it lands softly, the kind meant to reassure more than entertain. You notice how care here is communal. Healing doesn't happen behind closed doors. It happens in the open, woven into evening routines, as natural as cooking or storytelling. Midwifery knowledge surfaces in hushed conversation. An elder woman checks on a pregnant neighbor, asking about sleep, appetite, and dreams. You learn, through fragments, that birth is a shared responsibility, supported by experienced women and guided by ritual as much as practical skill. Historians still argue about the exact practices surrounding Taino childbirth, especially how much ritual-accompanied delivery versus pragmatic care, but watching now, it's clear that reassurance, experience, and community presence matter most. You're shown a bundle of dried bark used for fevers and another leaf chewed for tooth pain. Someone mentions a remedy for stomach trouble involving charcoal and ash, and you instinctively raise an eyebrow. A quiet chuckle passes through the group, light joke number 2, as someone says it's not as bad as it sounds, especially after a heavy meal. Quirky tidbit, some early observers recorded Taino healers using smoke and chanting alongside herbs to confuse illness, though scholars still debate whether this was symbolic, psychological, or believed to affect spirits directly. As the night deepens, the tone softens further. Care shifts from treatment to comfort. Hammocks are adjusted, blankets pulled higher, and a child is rocked gently until their breathing evens out. The bahik moves slowly now, checking in, offering quiet words, touching shoulders lightly. You notice how no one is rushed away. Healing here includes time to rest, to be seen, to be held within the group. Outside, insects hum steadily, and the distant surf provides a slow, reliable rhythm. You sit near the doorway, feeling the warmth of the fire on your legs, watching shadows ripple across the walls. The village feels held together by these small acts of attention, wrapping an ankle, offering a drink, listening to a worry before sleep. You probably won't survive this style if you expect healing to be instant, because here it unfolds gently, paced to the body and the night. As people begin to drift toward sleep, the remedies are set aside, covered carefully, ready for tomorrow. The bahiki offers a final murmured blessing, not dramatic, just a soft acknowledgement of balance restored, or at least tended. Historians still argue whether Taino healing leaned more towards spiritual causation or empirical observation. But sitting here, you sense the two are inseparable. You rise quietly, stepping back into the night air. Stars scatter overhead, and a breeze carries the scent of herbs and smoke. The village settles, aches soothed, worries eased for now. Care has done its quiet work, and as you move toward your own hammock, you feel the gentle assurance that if something goes wrong tomorrow, There will be hands ready, herbs waiting, and voices calm enough to guide you back to rest. The night doesn't fully close in, it breathes, opening pathways outward as the trade winds stir and the village turns its attention beyond the familiar shoreline. You sense it in the way people linger near the beach, scanning the dark water for shapes that don't belong to stars or waves. Canoes are pulled higher onto the sand, ready not for fishing now, but for visitors. You probably won't survive this style if you think island life is isolated, because these waters are roads, and the Taino know exactly how to travel them. A low call carries across the surf, answered moments later by another. Soon, a canoe glides into view, its silhouette rocking gently as it approaches. Torches are lifted, not in alarm, but welcome. Visitors step ashore, neighbours from another island, bringing bundles wrapped in leaves. Greetings are warm, familiar, punctuated with laughter and brief embraces. Mainstream history confirms this rhythm. Taino communities maintained wide trade and communication networks across the Caribbean, exchanging goods, news and relationships long before any outsiders appeared. You watch as gifts are opened and admired, polished shells change hands, cotton belts are unfurled, and a finely shaped stone blade earns a small murmur of appreciation. In return, baskets of cassava bread and smoked fish are offered without hesitation. Trade here doesn't feel transactional, it feels relational. Items move, but so does trust. You notice how the cacique observes quietly, stepping in only when needed, letting hospitality do most of the work. Stories follow the goods. Someone mentions a reef farther east yielding unusually large fish this season. Another speaks of a storm that tore palm roofs on a distant island, prompting nods and sympathetic murmurs. Information travels just as carefully as objects. You realize these visits are how knowledge spreads, about weather patterns, shifting currents, and safe passages. Historians still argue how formal these inter-island alliances were, whether bound by strict obligations or flexible friendships, but watching now, adaptability seems to be the key. Food is shared again, smaller portions this time, passed around as people settle into loose circles. The visitors speak of familiar spirits honoured in slightly different ways, and comparisons spark gentle debate rather than conflict. Light joke number 1 drifts through when someone insists their island's cassava bread is flatter because the wind presses it down, earning good-natured groans. The mood stays easy, curiosity outweighing rivalry. You notice subtle caution woven into the welcome. Canoes are watched, weapons kept nearby, but relaxed, eyes attentive even during laughter. Hospitality doesn't mean naivety. These waters can carry friends or trouble, and the village knows the difference usually announces itself early. A quirky tidbit surfaces when someone mentions leaving offerings at certain headlands to ensure safe travel, though scholars still debate whether these were spiritual precautions or navigational markers wrapped in belief. As the visit winds down, plans are quietly made. A return journey is discussed, along with items promised for next time. Names are repeated, faces studied, relationships reinforced. Children listen closely, memorizing which islands belong to which stories. You probably won't survive this style if you forget names or favors, because memory is currency here, and it's carefully kept. Eventually, the visitors return to their canoe, torches lighting their path back across the sand. Goodbyes are unhurried, voices low, hands lingering in farewell gestures. The canoe slips back into darkness, becoming just another shadow among waves and stars. You stand with the villagers, watching until it disappears entirely. The sea feels larger now, but less lonely. Connections stretch across it, invisible but strong, linking fires, gardens, songs, and sleep across miles of water. As you turn away from the shore, the village carries those connections inward, folding distant places into tomorrow's conversations and dreams. The wind shifts sometime after midnight, and even half asleep, you feel it, a subtle change in pressure, a cooler breath moving through the palms. The village stirs just enough to notice. Someone tightens a roof tie. Another checks the sky. Reading cloud shapes the way you might read a familiar face. Seasons here aren't pages on a calendar. They're patterns felt in skin, soil, and sea. You probably won't survive this style if you ignore those signs, because island life depends on paying attention long before trouble arrives. You walk quietly with a few others toward the edge of the gardens, where the canucos sit raised and ready. These aren't just planting mounds, they're insurance. Mainstream history confirms that raised canuco systems helped protect crops from flooding and erosion during heavy rains. You see how channels guide water away, how certain plants are placed higher or lower depending on how much moisture they can tolerate. It's preparation disguised as routine, resilience built into everyday choices. Someone gestures toward the horizon, where clouds stack faintly in the moonlight. Not a storm tonight, but maybe soon. Talk turns low and practical. Who will check the canoes tomorrow? Which roofs need reinforcing? Whether cassava stores are enough if fishing days are lost to rough seas? There's no panic, just adjustment. You realize resilience here isn't dramatic, it's incremental. 1,000 small decisions made calmly and early. Historians still argue how frequently hurricanes disrupted Taino settlements versus how effectively communities adapted and rebuilt. But standing here, adaptation feels like the default state. You help carry extra baskets of cassava bread into a drier storage space, the loaves light but reassuring in your hands. Children, still awake despite the hour, are guided gently to higher ground huts, just in case. An elder tells a short story, not a full tale, just a reminder, about a season when the winds taught everyone patience. Light joke number 1 slips in when someone says the winds listen better when you don't yell at them, earning a few sleepy chuckles. The conversation drifts to droughts too, the other side of the cycle. People recall times when gardens shrank and fishing grounds shifted. Strategies surface, rotating plots, relying more on shellfish, trading farther afield. A quirky tidbit emerges when someone mentions planting certain herbs near cassava to confuse dry spirits, though scholars still debate whether this was symbolic belief or early pest control logic wrapped in spiritual language. Either way, the practice persists because it works, if not on spirits, then on morale. You notice how children absorb all of this without formal teaching. They're not shielded from the idea of storms or scarcity. They're included in the planning, reassured by competence rather than denial. This, too, is resilience. You probably won't survive this style if you expect certainty, because life here accepts unpredictability as a given and builds flexibility around it. As the night deepens again, preparations slow. The immediate tasks are done. Roofs are secure, food is stored, and the watchful glances toward the sky soften. People return to hammocks, sleep reclaiming its place. The village doesn't brace for disaster, it rests, trusting the work already done. You lie back, listening to the wind thread through palm leaves, the steady pulse of surf, the soft creak of wood. The seasons will turn, storms will come and go, gardens will fail and flourish again. Through it all, routines adapt, knowledge shifts hands, and the village endures. Historians still argue whether this resilience was conscious strategy or cultural instinct, but from where you rest, the distinction doesn't matter. What matters is that when the wind changes, the village listens and answers together. Night has fully claimed the village now, not suddenly, but with the patient confidence of something that knows it belongs. Fires burn low, reduced to glowing embers that pulse softly, breathing in and out. You move toward the sleeping area, past bohos where hammocks sway gently, each one cradling a tired body. The sounds are minimal now, an occasional cough, the rustle of fabric, the soft murmur of someone settling in. You probably won't survive this style if you expect a hard stop to the day, because here, rest arrives gradually, like tide water easing over sand. You slip into a hammock yourself, the woven fibers cool at first, then warming as you settle. Above you, palm leaves overlap like layered hands, letting starlight peek through in scattered fragments. The air smells faintly of smoke, salt, and dried herbs, a comforting blend that signals safety and familiarity. Mainstream history reminds us that hammocks were central to Taino daily life, designed to keep sleepers cool, elevated, and gently rocked by air and motion. You feel that wisdom immediately as the hammock sways, your body finding its balance without effort. Nearby, a small fire crackles softly, watched by someone half awake, half dreaming. An elder stirs the embers with a stick, sending a brief shimmer of orange into the dark. Fire here isn't dramatic now. It's companionable. A quirky tidbit drifts through your thoughts. Some accounts suggest embers were kept alive overnight to symbolize continuity and protection, though historians still argue whether this was ritualized belief or simple practicality layered with meaning. Either way, the glow feels reassuring, like a heartbeat you don't need to check. The village settles deeper. Breathing slows. Even the insects seem to soften their rhythm, sinking to the late hour. You hear the distant sea again, steady and low, the same sound that welcomed you in the morning and carried the canoes out and back. The day has closed its circle. Gardens tended, nets pulled, stories told, spirits acknowledged, bodies cared for. Nothing rushed, nothing wasted. Historians still argue how much of this nightly quiet was intentional ritual versus natural fatigue, but lying here, it feels deliberate in the gentlest way. Rest is respected. Sleep is not escape, it's preparation. Dreams matter, tomorrow matters, and so does this moment of stillness in between. And now, as promised, the pace slows even more. The fire dims until it's mostly memory, glowing faintly beneath a skin of ash. The stars blur slightly as your eyes grow heavy. The hammock's sway becomes barely perceptible, like floating on calm water. Warmth gathers around you, not heat, just enough to feel held. Thoughts loose. Images drift without effort. Cassava leaves in morning light, silverfish flashing beneath waves, hands shaping clay, feet tapping sand in time with drums. They fade one by one, dissolving into darker, softer shapes. The village exhales fully now, wrapped in night, secure in routines older than any single lifetime. You don't need to stay awake to hold this place in mind. It will still be here when you return, tomorrow or in memory. For now, the embers dim, the sea hums, and sleep opens its quiet door. Sweet dreams.